Demographic winter is coming. According to demographic estimates, the number of babies now being born is below the demographic replacement rate. In other words, the global population will start falling because not enough babies are being born to replace the people that are dying. Now, the global fertility collapse has caught many population scientists by surprise because they didn't think that we'd be below the replacement rate until late 2020. Yet here we are in 2024, below that mark. This has also been a surprise because the so-called fertility rate collapse has affected both developed and developing countries alike.
Countries are begging men to have kids. Watch to the end of the video to fully understand the implications on society and for women as men are refusing to have children and are walking away from society. And now let's just go ahead and jump right into the video.
As many people already know, Japan has struggled with a downward spinning spiral of the birth rate for a while now. But this problem has been a widespread issue throughout most of East Asia, with places like Hong Kong and South Korea reaching birth rate levels of below 1. Now, I know there are a lot of places around the world where non-marital birth is perfectly fine, but in most East Asian countries, it's a hell fucking no. So obviously, if baby is only socially acceptable with marriage, but no one's getting married, then you're not gonna get any babies. But before you jump on the notion that this is just plain old social conservatism, which is partially true, the bigger issue beyond the cultural expectations is that living is just too hard. It's one thing to be living in a country with a very strong social safety net where slipping through the cracks of poverty and despair is pretty difficult, versus a hyper-capitalist country where life is a zero-sum game. And becoming a parent, especially a single parent, most likely a single mother, equates to a metaphorical prison sentence. On top of that, many Confucianist Asian societies have hierarchies everywhere. It's often baked into the language itself, it's in schools, work, family, social life, everything. And we're not just talking about the unspoken, hidden types of hierarchies where you know your boss is not your friend, but you still call them by their first name. No, this type of hierarchy is direct, it's clear, it's a duty. Sometimes it's definitely a good thing, especially when collective action and cooperation is needed, because hyper-individualism sucks at coordinating, so things like enforcing a mask mandate, for example, during a global pandemic tends to go about a bit more smoothly. But way too often, this rigid hierarchy states that women be treated like shit because society will somehow crumble apart if they don't stay in line. So if marriage calls for this misery of fulfilling gendered expectations like cleaning after your husband, taking care of the kids, and pleasing your in-laws, oftentimes while also working a full-time job because of the non-existent social safety net, then why would anybody want to put themselves through that?
The implications of men choosing not to have kids is becoming quite significant. While they try to act like, oh, well, it's because of childcare and women don't have access to affordable childcare, and that's the reason why. No, men are walking away. Men are beginning to say we're not going to court relationships anymore. Men are going MGTOW. Men going their own way. They're joining that. Women chose the bear, so now they can go and live in the forest. Men are done with society. Men are done with relationships. And countries are actually begging men to go and make babies right now, guys. Within 10 years, this is going to be a major demographic crisis that we're going to witness. And of course, all of those people who said that, oh, we're having issues with overpopulation, we don't need to have children. A lot of the Sims are responsible for this, okay? They're going to be saying, well, don't worry, automation is on the way. We're getting closer and closer to automation. All the billionaires, oh, automation would save the future. Guys, we are going to see stagnation within the economy as well. Okay, right now we are entering into stagflation. All right, stagflation is a dirty word that no one basically wants to talk about. Because with stagflation, it's basically like a depression. It's a very horrible thing to happen. And this is the society. This is what we are now facing. And of course, men are increasingly just walking away from relationships, dating. Men pay 80% of all taxes in Western society, and women make 80% of all consumer purchases. This basically means that if men are not actively out there in the workforce, creating value and creating new wealth, there is no wealth for anyone. Everything begins to fall apart. Everything begins to collapse. The government cannot survive. And if the government starts to go after men and add bachelor taxes, Men will just make less money because the average man could live comfortably in a shoebox at the side of the road. The average woman cannot. When a man passes away, over the course of a man's life, he will leave a surplus on the economy. So he will basically put more money into the economy that he takes out over the course of his life. The average woman will leave a deficit on the economy. She will take more money out of the economy over the course of her life than she puts into it. If men continue to walk away, refuse to make babies, refuse to work longer hours, refuse to have kids, refuse to get married, the entirety of the economy is placed upon the backs of the state and also women. And the state does not have that kind of money to be some woman's come up. The state does not have that kind of money to subsidize the living and total expenses of women and children in Western society. You have to also remember that women and the state, they absolutely resent us and do not like us. So they will never actually come right out and say they need us. And the simple truth is that they will simply condemn us. I told you the story of the Roman Empire where, the emperor condemned a single men and said they were worse than all of the criminals in all of Rome, and they were punishments for them. They couldn't basically go to public, they could not engage in public entertainment events, so they can go to the Colosseum or the theater, and they had to run in the streets during the winter chain gang style, and they still wouldn't marry. And within 100 years, there was no military, there was no production of wealth anymore. The empire was relying entirely upon slave labor to take care of the women, and because basically all of the empire's resources were being used to subsidize the living of women. And then the barbarians came along, and the empire tried to bribe the barbarians with land, and the barbarians basically called the bluff, realizing the emperor had no clothes, had no military, pillaged the empire. We were plunged into 1,000 years of darkness, and women suffered really, really bad during that time. They were basically out in the fields working alongside the men, but they had way fewer rights, and it was just absolutely a terrible time.
Why is the U.S. experiencing such a significant drop in birth rate? 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, life expectancy wasn't too high, and kids dropped off at a pretty good rate. Unclean water, unclean food, no vaccines. Along come the 1900s. Here in the U.S., after World War II, you could have a single person with an income that would allow you to buy your house, send kids to college, and continue to climb that ladder. Of course, that came along with the destruction of the multi-generational home and a lot of emphasis on moms doing pretty much everything at home and everything child rearing / parenting by themselves. Now the last generation of two is recognizing that two incomes might not be enough to afford the home, get you out of debt from college, let alone get you anywhere close to comfortably raising even one kid. So let's just say a couple nowadays wants to have a kid, and a female gets pregnant. They choose to have a kid. The woman does so at the risk to her own body. Now, particular risk in some states where it can be a life or death matter. Seriously, I mean it. Like right now in the Supreme Court, they're arguing a case that's been brought forth by Idaho where you can try and decide how much damage, how many organs a woman can lose before emergency care needs to be rendered to still comply with EMTALA, a law that governs who and how things should be treated in the emergency room. And for this couple, if they get through the pregnancy and the woman is not harmed physically, she still will have that baby at the detriment of her career, because again, both of them are likely going to have to work to afford the house and to afford the kid and afford college and all those kind of things that they may want to go through for their kid. And for families not so fortunate to even be able to consider buying a house or sending their kid to college, but just wanting to feed them, well, if you're in tough financial shape, well, boy, our country does nothing for you. No paid maternity leave, no universal child care, no support in helping raise that kid in a way that will allow a family to be comfortable. And yet conservatives in the GOP, which are decrying the lower birth weight, are the exact same party that are actively working at reducing benefits for moms and babies. SNAP and WIC, universal child care again, no way. Healthcare costs to be covered, no way. Have a kid, but then you deal with that enormous expense in a world where you can't even make ends meet. I think we also forgot to mention that women who work here in the U.S. get paid a percentage of what men get paid. They deal with a lot more harassment, and again, having a child is for sure likely to harm their career path compared to the male counterparts. So in a country where societal factors, legal factors, political factors, all are kind of stacked against women and for sure choosing to have a child, is it really a wonder why our birth rate's declining?
You see, guys, much of what's happening here is the fault of the boomers, the don't blame me boomers, the a whole is a whole boomers, all right? If you look at the example on the screen, we have, the first generation, which is going to be the greatest generation. And basically they were like, we will make a better world for our children. Then the silent generation, we will make a better world for our children. And then the baby boomers, bleep you entitled brats. And then of course the children of the boomers, the millennials, kids, ? Not happening. And yes, they skipped entirely over Gen X. And as a Zennial, let me just say, that's just the way we like it. Ultimately, this is the reality that the boomers have created for us, a reality where people will just no longer have kids. And they don't seem to understand, they don't really care that this is only going to make things harder for them because there's going to be no one to take care of them or to pay future taxes as men are walking away and distancing themselves from a society that absolutely does not like them and resents them.
And finally, in Russia, Vladimir Putin has launched an unusual campaign to combat a plunging population crisis. Amid dropping birth rates, Putin is urging Russians to take drastic measures, including having sex during lunch breaks at work. In an effort to reverse the demographic crisis, employees are being encouraged to procreate on the clock. Here's our final report with more.
In the heart of the Kremlin, Vladimir Putin is facing a crisis, but this time it's not on the battlefield. Russia's population is in steep decline, with a fertility rate of only 1.5 children per woman. The country is heading towards a demographic disaster. By 2050, experts predict the population could drop from 146 million to 136 million. But Putin has a plan, one that's as controversial as it is audacious. Russians must have more children, and he's not waiting for love or long weekends to do it. At a recent press conference, Putin declared that the preservation of the Russian people was the nation's highest priority. His government is scrambling to implement a range of bold measures to raise the birth rate, and yes, it includes sex at work. Workers are being encouraged to use their lunch and coffee breaks for procreation, as the health minister rather bluntly put it. When asked how busy professionals could possibly find time to make babies, he smiled and said, "During break times, life flies by too quickly." However, this isn't just talk. In Moscow, women between 18 and 40 are being asked to attend free fertility screenings to assess their reproductive potential. Meanwhile, some regions are also offering cash incentives to young women, like over $11,000 in Chelyabinsk for having a baby before turning 24. Politicians have even publicly called out employers, urging them to monitor birth rates among their staff. Each employer should ask themselves, said MP Tatiana Butskaya, how many children have been born this year? What are you doing to raise that number? Other female politicians even pushed women to start having children as early as 18 or 19. Give birth, and give birth again, urged another MP. While Putin has never disclosed how many children he personally has, officially he has 2 daughters from a previous marriage, yet various reports have uncovered 2 young sons with his longtime lover and former Olympic gold medalist gymnast Elena Kabaeva, and a 21-year-old daughter from another relationship. Putin, it seems, is quietly following his own advice.
I mean, this is how bad and how serious things are right now. Even in countries like Russia, you have Putin telling men to go and find someone to be physically intimate with in between working because they need people to do the jobs, but they also need babies. So in between being a SLAVE for the state, you need to go and start putting out babies. Guys, this is how I told you, the Sims are destructive. The Sims are absolutely dangerous. They are a catastrophe for society. They are the end of humanity. We cannot protect ourselves. We cannot do anything because of the Sims. The Sims are evil. The Sims are awful. The Sims are scumbags. I said it. They are wicked, wicked people. If you're a Sim, get the hell out of here. Leave this channel, okay? We don't want you here. I don't want you here. You don't deserve this knowledge, all right? Some of y'all are arguing with me in the comments, but you're watching the entire video. Get the heck out of here. Go listen to channels like Destiny. Go listen to the CUKs out there, because that is a pathway to destruction and destitution, and that is what I wish for the Sims. I wish upon the Sims, you know, that type of thing, because they are evil individuals. They're disgusting. They're absolutely aren't they disgusting, guys? Aren't they? They're disgusting. Sims are disgusting. My gosh, they're ugly too, aren't they? Sims are ugly, and they're so nasty. They're disgusting. My goodness, aren't they? My gosh, if you're a simp, you're so disgusting. You're so disgusting. Why are you here? You're not even wanted here. My gosh, they're just disgusting to look at and to listen to. They're disgusting to be around. It's like they can't even take a clue. They're so disgusting.
With birth rates dropping dramatically in Japan, a company there has announced that it is stopping production of diapers for babies. It says demand is simply not there. Instead, it's refocusing on the growing market, diapers for adults. In fact, Pampers for your parents have outsold diapers for your newborn now for about a decade. It's a surprising piece of data that shines a light on a serious problem. The number of births in Japan dropped to a new low last year, with more than twice as many deaths as new babies born. If things continue that way, Japan's population could shrink by 30% over the next 45 years. My next guest tonight has been studying Japan's futuristic solution to its demographic crisis. She's the author of the book Robo Sapiens Japanicus: Robots, Gender, Family, and the Japanese Nation, which explores the role of robots in Japanese culture and society. I'm pleased to welcome to the day Jennifer Robertson. She's a professor of anthropology and history of art at the University of Michigan. So glad that we could connect tonight. And before we talk about solutions, let's just talk about the situation as it is. Just how serious, and I say it's a crisis because we are always talking about, we always want to see growth. But is it a crisis, a demographic crisis that Japan is dealing with?
Demographically, yes, in terms of the number of younger people in Japan, as in contrast to the number of older people in Japan. It's interesting to note that at the height of the Japanese Empire in 1940, the population was about 78 million people, but most of them were young. And today the population is about 123 million people, and about 30% of the population is over 65. And this percentage grows to almost 80 to 90% in the rural areas, including the area of the latest earthquake in Japan in Ishikawa Prefecture on the Japan seacoast.
Yeah, so what you're saying is basically the demographic, the chart has flip-flopped in the past century. And successive Japanese governments, have they tried and been unable to encourage, the people to get married and have more babies?
Very good question. Well, during the height of the Pacific War, roughly 1932 to 1945 in Japan, the government withheld birth control and also allowed soldiers to take 2-week furloughs so they could impregnate their wives, to put it directly. Today in democratic Japan, they can't do that. And so they are trying all sorts of options, giving more money to families to have children. The idea was floated back during the administration of the late former Prime Minister Abe in 2006-07 to introduce robots to the home, but that hasn't proved feasible at all. And I'm sure you're going to ask me, well, where are the robots in Japan?
Yeah, well, I was going to let our viewers know. Yeah, we started by talking about diapers for adults and for older people, and now we're talking about the robot revolution that has it happened or has yet to happen?
Well, there's a lot of mystification of robots in Japan because I think Japan is somehow ripe for the confusion of science fiction and real world, actual, tangible robots. And people tend to think that the Japanese are sharing, sidewalk space and homes and office places with robots. But that is really far from the case. Most of the robots you find, for example, in homes are small entertainment robots or household security robots. The robots that are used in elder care facilities and assisted living homes take the shape of robot bathtubs or robot wheelchairs, and also possibly the most practical robot, the robot commode. But many people have the idea that Japanese are being serviced by humanoid robots, which are not very practical at all. And I can't emphasize enough that humanoid robots are very expensive to build. They're quite fragile. Yeah. And they are not end products. Rather, they are platforms for the generation of other industries. Increasingly surveillance, and I hate to say this, the weapons economy.
Plus, I mean, we know if you've ever been in a nursing home, people who work there, they have some serious muscles. I mean, you're lifting people all the time, and we haven't seen robots doing that too successfully. Why is Japan pinning its hopes on robots instead of just simply opening its borders to immigration like many countries in the West are doing?
Well, Japan has always followed a technical solution to patently social problems, and they pursued a course of automation over replacement immigration after World War II. However, the robot revolution hasn't emerged as imagined back in the early years of this century. And so what's happening is that it's a lot easier to tweak visa regulations and visa criteria and to allow in more professional workers and also manual workers. Now, there is an estimated shortage of 60,000 to 270,000 nurses in Japan. And earlier in this century, nurses from the Philippines and Indonesia were recruited, but they had to pass a really rigorous language exam, and many of them failed, got disappointed, demoralized, and ended up leaving. So what the government is doing now is working with ChatGPT to create translation services so that more foreign nurses will be able to communicate more efficiently with Japanese doctors and nurses and, of course, their patients.
It's interesting. I know back in 2007, former Prime Minister Abe envisioned Japan as a fully robotized society by 2025. That is next year. Is artificial intelligence, is it going to see the rise of the robots next year or year or two?
Yeah. Well, it depends what you mean by rise of the robots. I mean, if you're talking about surveillance and weapons, absolutely. Those are the most lucrative industries in robotics today in Japan. But, Abe's former Prime Minister and late Prime Minister Abe's robotic vision was pretty much straight out of science fiction. And many Japanese said, this is dated science fiction. It's not feasible. It's not practical. But the sensors, whether they're touch or sight, sound, that went into those initial robot experiments were all spun off into the industries that are far more lucrative today, including, so-called autonomous cars, drones. The Japanese are now getting into the fighter plane market.
Yeah, that's right.
But especially surveillance. ChatGPT has been called a great plagiarism machine, and it learns on data that is fed to it, but it's also streaming data. So data today is capital, and some of these companies that are creating robots that provide translation services, for example, are also collecting that data and then selling them to other parties.
Well, I mean, it's fascinating when you think about it, and it makes you wonder, too, are we going to see the singularity event happen this decade or the next decade? And if so, will the merge of machine and man, will that make a difference? I mean, these are huge questions, fascinating. So glad we got to talk with you, Jennifer Robertson. Please come back, because I have a feeling there'll be lots to talk about in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It was a pleasure, and I hope to come back.
What I think is really incredible about this entire situation that we're witnessing now happening in countries like Japan is the fact that they don't have the male power anymore to care for themselves. When you have major catastrophic events like earthquakes, like natural disasters, they need manpower. They need men to step up. And guess what? Men are no longer there. Men are no longer being active in the situation. Men are increasingly saying, guess what? You chose the bear. Now deal with it. Go play in the forest. So men are staying home. Men are playing video games when there is a natural disaster, like what's happening in Florida at the time of making this video. There's not enough manpower. Basically, men take off. Men flee. It's women and children, especially women, who get left behind. And no one's coming to rescue them. And they're going to have to figure it out for themselves. They can go and find the bear because men are not coming to help them. And guys, I just want to remind you to go ahead and check out the Angry Guy Clubhouse. You can get top expat and passport bro travel tips, digital nomad guides, and passive income strategies. Free subscribers get access to videos, podcasts, articles, and community chat. Plus, receive the passive income blueprint just for subscribing. Paid subscribers unlock exclusive guides like the How to Build an Online Business in 24 Hours ebook, wealth building blueprints, and crypto updates. Join us now. Click the link in the description.
Japan's fertility rate has hit an historic low. It fell for the 8th straight year last year to just 1.2. That's down from 1.26 in 2022. That is significantly below what is needed to sustain the population. CNA's Mitch Ishida explains what this means.
With fewer babies, the outlook for Japan to remain a strong economy is bleak. If the fertility rate continues to fall at the same pace, Japan's population could shrink by 30% by 2070, with seniors aged 65 and up making up close to 40% of its people. Among the 47 prefectures, the fertility rate in the capital city Tokyo is the lowest at just 0.99, according to figures from the Health Ministry. Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshimasa Hayashi said the situation was critical and measures have to be taken immediately. He cited the unstable economy and the challenges of balancing work and childrearing as factors that are deterring Japanese from having children, adding that the next 6 years is the last chance to reverse the trend, which is projected to accelerate after 2030. On Wednesday, the ruling coalition passed a new law to expand subsidies for children by scrapping the income cap for parents receiving the benefits. The government plans to raise medical insurance premiums for the public in order to fund the new measures. But media polls suggest that the public is not supportive and that the measures may not have the desired effect. In fact, there's a risk they might backfire on the Kishida cabinet, which is already unpopular due to Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's tax-raising image. Michio Ishida, CNA, Tokyo.
You see, men, guys are guardians of the galaxy. We are the protectors of society. We are the gatekeepers of prosperity. A country without its men is not a country. A country without its men is a wasteland. Every country is facing a major demographic crisis right now. And to be very clear, a lot of it is centered entirely around women's liberation and simp culture. Simp culture is absolutely disgusting. Simp culture has destroyed the world. And simp culture it's something that's been going on for well over 100 years. And as a result of the actions of the deplorable simps, it has led to a downright rise in tyranny and a completely disregard for men and basic human rights for men and boys. Simps are responsible for this. And guys, a simp cannot help itself because simps are basically just unable to like reflect. Simps, you have to remember, a simp is an agent of the state. A simp operates as an agent of the state, so their goal, their entirety, is to destroy you. Their entirety is to ruin you. Their entirety is to wreck you, because the simp does not like you. You have to, this is how simps are. Simps will always keep on simping because that's their way of survival. Their job is to reallocate wealth and resources from men to the state. Okay, and they'll do it through whatever means they can. You have to I've said it once and I'll say it again. A simp is a treacherous, evil individual. There is no such thing as a good simp. All simps are bad. All simps are evil. And there are those who believe that, oh, it's more complicated than that. No, it's not, guys. So many women chose to go down this path, and now they're basically reeling for the poor decisions that they've made. You know, they chose this life, so be about that life then. You know, guys, ultimately, this is only going to lead to more women finding themselves in increased states of poverty and destitution as more men continue to walk away. Even in the worst economic downturns and hardship, you're going to see men thriving while women struggle because the average man can live happily in a shoebox at the side of the road. What do you guys think regarding this? Countries are begging men to have kids, and men are just whispering no. Let me know your thoughts, and we'll talk about it in the comments. Like the video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you like the video, share the video. And just remember that all roads lead to MWA, men walking away. And cheers.